Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, Internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a chilled out review of the new Lycus album, Tempest. These guys are a metal outfit from the West Coast. They've been around for several years, but this is their first big studio recorded commercial full-length release. The band actually features an ex-member of the group Death Heaven. For those of you who are huge into the record Sunbather, you might want to check this album out as well, but it's not as if Lycus or Tempest have that much bearing in the experimental black metal or progressive black metal, black gaze world. Still, I would say this record is a forward-thinking and very melodic and engaging approach to the style of metal that this band does play. Very slow, dirge-like funeral doom metal. Metal songs in this style feature tempos that move like the seasons, monolithic riffs that have an epic sound, and melodies that are incredibly mournful and just have this strong sense of sadness. Pretty much the style's defining characteristics since the 90s, when it was molded by bands like Thergothon and Funeral, as well as Esoteric. A recent band to catch a lot of attention playing in this style has been Ahab, if you count about 6 years ago as being recent. Lycus seems really conscious of this genre's past, but they want to keep things interesting and modern as well. As slow as this band's songs are, they add a lot of detail and progressions into the mix, really justifying the long lengths of the 3 tracks here that are 9, 11, and 20 minutes. There's endlessly flowing melodies throughout this LP, a lot of them executed by guitar leads. Sometimes they're layered and harmonized in a beautiful way, tons of dramatic drum fills, and expressive guitar chords that remind me of chord progressions that I've heard on records like Wolves in the Throne Room's Two Hunters, or even that new Pallbearer record. Plus, there are plenty of peaks and valleys as these songs go from beginning to end. I dig the vocals on this LP too. I wish there was a bit more variety to them, but just these monstrous growls front pretty much every track here. That, combined together with the melody and just the sloth-like pace of these songs, I feel like I'm listening to slowed down death metal power ballads. It's skulls and rock horns and corpses and lighters. In a way, the music on this LP is just reflective of the Paolo Girardi oil painting that is slapped on the cover. It's just a really gruesome display, but it's the very melodic coloring that gives these grim edges flavor and depth and emotion. There isn't much on Tempest that I would say is catchy. You're not really gonna commit much of this album to memory if you're just giving it a cursory listen. I would say that's because this is more of an album to just get lost in. And that's easy to do with just how huge the sound Lycus presents is, on top of the fact that the melodies on this LP, on these songs, are constantly shifting, but they occur and just sort of blossom at this very slow pace that keeps them engaging, but also makes them sort of easy to take in, even though these songs are just constantly winding. There's details and I guess variety on these tracks, but not so much it's dizzying. Even as the band layers on more guitars, throws in more background vocals, or even puts strings, which they do at several phases in these songs. The opening track on this LP, COMA Burn, opens up with these minor toned, harmonious chords that are just loud, distorted, blaring. They just have this massive sound. There's a ton of bass in this mix, and even though it's incredibly heavy, it's not like this pummeling or overwhelming heaviness. Really, it's more of an enveloping heaviness. It's just vast, it's open. The more I listen to this record, the more it feels like I'm sinking down into a swamp, and the deeper down I go, the more layers sort of pile on top of me. One guitar on top of another guitar, more vocals, more bass, the strings, and what's so awesome is that this record is so freaking loud, and yet all of these things are balanced really nicely in the mix. Later into the song COMA Burn, you get these double bass drums and these harsher vocals. It's really a visceral point on this track, a blood pumping point, especially with the tremolo pick guitars on this spot in the song. Thunderous riffs come later after this, and the way that some of the chords resolve that the band is playing here at the end of the track, it almost feels kind of uplifting or even positive. As varied as some of these songs are when you listen to them closely, that's one thing that I wish these tracks had a little bit more of. Not only that just positive beauty, but those more just adrenaline-fed moments. Most of this record shoots for an epically dreary vibe, and that's fine because the band does it incredibly well. I just wish there were more visceral spots because it definitely would have given this LP a bit more of a flow. Because while I do enjoy the 3 tracks here a lot, I don't really feel like I'm on a journey from beginning to end with the album. But for sure, each track in itself feels like a trip. Even the slower and more melodically layered track Engravings, the second song here, even though it is a bit shorter than the opener and it doesn't really have a hard-hitting spot in its 9-minute runtime, I think it may be my favorite track here. Just because of how beautiful some of the guitar phrasing is. And the closer on here, while it does end with a 7-minute drone, which I guess in a sense is giving this album some kind of closure, it is a really hypnotic spot on the LP, and it does kind of provide some cool down time to make me feel like, okay, this is done. But I wouldn't necessarily say that the song is any more epic or climactic than the 2 previous tracks. I still think the heavy riffs and a lot of the guitar phrasing in the middle of the track are great, and I do love the intro, which feels very GROWL-like, with its echo-drenched guitars, which are just shimmering and have a bit of a desert vibe to them. I just wish the band did something a little bit more radical to it. I do think in a sense they were conscious of either the limitations or just the very few elements that they were working with on these songs, and they didn't want to overdo it or anything like that, and only offered really just 40 minutes of music, which if you're talking about metal of this style, it's not really like Lycus is asking that much from the listener. I guess aside from the playing and the melody writing, the thing that I can commend this album for most is taking these ideas that would normally require a listener to be really patient and in a way sort of condense them down into a very succinct Funeral Doom metal record. I'm feeling a decent to strong 7 on this thing. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. This review is my opinion. If you don't like it, here's a straw. I want to give a shout out to AUSTEN, Young Lean, and MELODIES Bread. Only the strong subscribe. All mistakes were intentional. Anthony Fantano. Tempest. Lycus. Forever.